us today in person and over the web. So it's no doubt that outdoor recreation is booming across the West. The visitation is up just about everywhere that you look. That comes with a lot of benefits, but it also comes with a lot of challenges. So I'm happy to moderate this discussion today where we can talk about some of those challenges and more specifically and the ways that the state agencies and the governor's offices are addressing those challenges. So before we get started with the presentation, just to introduce myself, I'm Jordan Smith, I'm a professor up at Utah State University, where I run the Institute of Outdoor Recreation and Tourism. We do research on everything related to outdoor recreation, primarily within Utah, but do have quite a few projects outside the state as well. So we're going to start off with presentations. I'll let the panelists all introduce themselves. We're going to start with Vicki Varela, who is Managing Director for the Utah Office of Tourism. Vicki, take it away.
Good morning. Great to be here. And thank you for inviting us. I think I will go right to my first slide. Someone can advance the slides for me. And tell you a little bit about the Utah Office of Tourism. Our mission, and we can go to the next one, our mission at the Office of Tourism, as you can see, is that we'll have a state united in welcoming the world to experience soul-awakening adventure. Our mission under that vision is to elevate life in Utah through responsible tourism stewardship. I'll just note for you, this is a dramatically different vision and mission statement than we had 10 years ago, because we all know people love the West. We launched a campaign in 2013, the year I came into the role. Many of you are familiar with it, the Mighty Five. The call to action is to visit our beautiful 5 national parks. It's part of my legacy. I take credit for it. I take responsibility for it because it served its purpose better than we ever imagined to completely shift people's understanding of our beautiful state. And so in 2017, we launched what's called the Red Emerald Strategy, and we can go to the next slide. Complete rethink of the way we work, to recognize that we have an enormous responsibility to create a perpetual tourism economy, one that is properly integrated with all the other economic activities of rural and urban Utah, one that protects communities, has deep engagement with the communities to make sure that we build the tourism economy in their region in the way they want to. It's about prioritizing not just the quantity of visitors, but the quality of visitors, the quality of the visitor experience, encouraging people to immerse themselves, to have longer stays, and to come back over and over. Because our industry is like any other industry, repeat customers are the best customers because they know how to interact with you. They will be respectful. They will immerse themselves in the community and the ways that work for us as Utahns. We can go to the next slide. We can talk more about it in the discussion, but a fundamental element of our Forever Mighty strategy is about partnerships. And I'm so pleased to be here with this panel because we can drill down later in the discussion about the strong partnerships with everyone here that I think are our only path to make this work. And I acknowledge there are areas like Moab, Grand County in Utah where nobody started planning early enough. The local community didn't show proper initiative to create good transportation corridors. The state didn't have a clear strategy. And so now we are scrambling in areas like that to be really strong partners. And it's much harder when the frog has started to boil. And so I'm happy to share lessons with you. But I will just headline in the spirit of getting to the discussion, I will just headline two areas that we spend a lot of our time. I'll go to the next slide. Destination management. 10 years ago, we didn't even talk about destination management, but it is how we spend a lot of our time today. Everything from our State Department of Environmental Quality has what they call their Gotta Go campaign. You'll notice, any of you who do river trips will notice that we talk about feeling groovy, as in the groover. We spend a lot of time talking about human waste and figuring out ways that we can teach people to be responsible. And I'm just going to acknowledge that the COVID circumstances exacerbated this dramatically, and that many of the people that we know we need to educate are our own citizens. Many people who are what we call new to nature. And so we have ambassador campaigns to teach all these things. We're working closely with the Outdoor Recreation Commission on public safety issues related to the outdoor rec economy, the tourism economy. Really strong collaboration with the Utah Tourism Industry Association, strengthening our partnership with counties around the state, and then national parks planning. We could dedicate all our time to that, but we won't. And then my next slide, just to introduce you to the way we think, the way we organize our time. The final slide, if you can go to that, is around destination development. Figuring out ways to help communities, to help regions grow in the way that they want to grow. A great example is the community of Helper in Carbon County, an old coal town that is really reinventing in a way that has been designed by the local community to be an outdoor recreation mecca. It's attracted some of Utah's best artists, and they have a thriving Main Street. And so we're working with them to help them grow out and reinvent their economy in the ways that they have defined that they want to do locally. We can talk more about the Main Street program, which was just established in Utah for the first time. I know many states have Main Street programs to revitalize those, the heart of your communities with good retail, good signage, and so forth, and we're getting deep into that. Another area of destination development for us is around dark skies. Utah has the most dark sky designations of any state in the country. We're now at 24. I keep having to check with my staff because we keep expanding. Jeff Rasmussen at State Parks has shown great leadership there, and it's a way of giving people the Utah experience in a less crowded, different time of day, and so forth. I am going to turn the time back to you, Jordan, so we have plenty of time for discussion. Sorry I'm breathless. I did race in, but I got here.
Thanks, Vicki. Well, I'm glad we have all those programs that you mentioned. I'm sure we're going to come back and talk about them specifically in the discussion. And I'm really glad that we have Jeff here today on the forefront of dealing with a lot of these challenges. So just to provide some context to the challenges that the state park systems manage or are dealing with, about 3 times as many visitors come to state park systems across the U.S. relative to the national park systems. Often gets overlooked. We talk about national park visitation overcrowding issues in the federal public lands, but the state parks are experiencing the same challenges. So, Jeff, I'll turn it to you to talk through the programs of Utah State Parks.
Thank you, Jordan. My name's Jeff Rasmussen. I'm the director for Utah State Parks, and it has been busy, but I think that's a really good thing. Just telling you a little bit about our agency. We have 46 state parks now all across Utah. They offer scenic opportunities, recreational opportunities, opportunities for learning about history and our past. And I like to talk about it as an opportunity for our visitors to make memories with family and friends, and I think that's super important. And the other benefit of our state parks across the state, as with any other recreational areas, is they stimulate tourism. They bring tourism dollars throughout the state of Utah, here in the city areas as well as in rural Utah, all across the state, and that's where most of our state parks are. In addition to our state parks, we also manage 2 state monument areas. The State Monument Act is new to Utah, and we have 2 right now, one in Tooele County, just west of us now, out by Wendover, Danger Cave State Monument. Another one in Iron County in southern Utah, Old Iron Town. They're both historic sites, and I think they're the first 2 of many to come. In addition to that, we manage a handful of other properties that have historic and scenic value. We also oversee access, education, law enforcement, search and rescue efforts throughout our state parks as well as on public land in Utah. And recently, our biggest drive for education in Utah is about responsible recreation. We have so many people getting out and recreating, many of which have never experienced the outdoors, never been able to get out and have a fun time. And so through public service announcements, social media, website outreach, and a new app that we're working on that's called Parks Pass that I'll probably talk about later, we're reaching out to all of our visitors to make sure that they know how to recreate, have a good time, and be safe, but also be respectful of the other visitors and the land that they're recreating on. State Parks Visitation. Just like every other recreational manager, our state parks are super busy. Last year during COVID, we saw probably one of the biggest spikes, if not the biggest spike we've ever seen, a 33% increase in our visitation. And we thought it can't get any busier than that. This year we're already up 25% on top of that. To put that into perspective, I go back 5 years, our visitation was at 5 million visitors. We're now over 11 million visitors at our Utah state parks, and it continues to grow, and I don't see an end in sight. People are coming. People have discovered our state parks and Utah for that regard. One thing to highlight that happened this last year with the support of our governor and the legislature, we had a historic investment in our state park system, $120 million last legislative session to build 2 new state parks, one in Grand County over in eastern Utah near Moab, Utah Raptor State Park, another one in Morgan County at Bureau of Reclamation Lake, as well as 18 major projects throughout our state park system across Utah, building new campgrounds, adding more day use areas. And again, to kind of put this into perspective, what that means to us is we're getting another approximately 500 campsites to our campsite inventory. It's about a 20% increase in our camping sites. And if any of you have tried to book a camping site in Utah or probably anywhere, if you're not right online when you can make that reservation, it's gone. So that's super important. Another 1,000 or so parking spaces for our day use parking. That's a 10% increase. So this investment is going to make a really big difference in the number of people that we're able to accommodate at our state parks. And the way I look at it, we're going to be able to host literally thousands more people every day in our state parks just because of this expansion. So I'm just super excited about the support that we've received from that. Just to kind of wrap it up, we welcome and embrace the challenges as well as the benefits of this increased visitation. And one thing that there's not much good about COVID, but one thing that I do think that it brought to our state park system and tourism in general is it got people thinking about the outdoors and outdoor recreation that would have never thought about it before. And our state parks were open all last year. We saw all those new people, and certainly they bring challenges, but I think they're going to be lifelong customers because they've discovered the recreation and the outdoors and our state parks, and we're super excited about it. So there are some challenges and issues, but I look at it as a positive thing. It's great to have this enormous interest in outdoor recreation in state parks, and we're super excited about it. So I'll turn it back to you, Jordan.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. And it's great to hear about all the state investments in helping to meet that demand through the investments in supply. And kind of speaking of investments in supply, one of the things that Utah has been kind of at the forefront of is putting state resources into providing infrastructure for outdoor recreation, and Pitt's office has really been at the forefront of that. So I don't want to talk about your programs, Pitt, but the State Office of Outdoor Recreation was the first created in the country, I believe, back in 2013, and I think almost all Western states now have an office that's built very similarly based on the model that was originated here in Utah. So Pitt, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the Governor's Office of Outdoor Recreation and kind of the programs that you're leading there.
Okay, thank you. It's great to be here. It's an honor to speak to everybody this morning and talk about our office, and obviously love to talk about outdoor recreation in Utah. I'm Pitt Gruey. I've been the director for the Office of Outdoor Recreation for about a year and a half. And like Jordan said, we were the first office in the state, or in the country, established back in 2013. Since then, we've learned a lot. We've helped a lot of other states. We had a kind of an influx in new states forming this, and I'll talk about that in a second, in 2019, where many states across the country established offices of outdoor recreation and really doing great things in their states. But today I want to talk about a little bit the impacts of outdoor recreation in a public land state. It's great to, everybody knows that we have great national parks here. And as Jeff mentioned, talking about our state parks. But the reality is most recreators don't care whose land they're recreating on. They care that they're recreating on land. So whether it's BLM or Forest Service or state park or national park, they just want to recreate. And so what does that mean? It becomes tricky to manage over all of those different entities that are managing these lands. Just to give you a little shock value here of recreation increase through in the state of Utah through COVID and 2020 and 2021, the Wasatch Front Foothill Trail usage increased by 150 to 200% on most trails. That's where we were seeing 50,000 people a month ride a trail in Draper on their mountain bike. We were seeing 150,000 to 200,000 people be on the Jordan River Parkway, through this on walking their dogs or strollers or bikes or whatever. You can see, Strava data here along the Wasatch Front from 2019, where in June we'd see 176,000 trips. In 2020, we saw 246,000 trips recorded. And that's just one data source, Strava users. But huge increase. Little Hole Recreation Area on the Green River, Flaming Gorge. It's a national recreation area. Usage to that famous place for everybody to take off the river after fly fishing saw a 2,300% increase in usage in 2020. I don't know how you can get that many trailers to get boats out of the water in that location, but they figured it out. A Hole in the Rock Road, if any of you have been to the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument, this is the access point to the kind of southern end of the monument there. In May of 2021, they were averaging 1,200 cars a day down that dirt road. This is a picture of that dirt road. 1,200 cars a day down that dirt road, right? This is all on BLM property. Again, just a little shock value to see what the increases of recreation really are here in the state of Utah. And I'm sure many of you are seeing this across the West, as many of us being public land states and seeing this increase. So how are we dealing with that as a state? And Jordan alluded to this a little bit. We have what's called the UOR, which is Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant. So this was established in 2015. And so since then, we've given out $24 million for recreation infrastructure around the state of Utah. All of this funding supports communities or nonprofits. You have to be either a nonprofit or a municipality to qualify for this funding. It requires a 50-50 match. So we really have to get buy-in from these communities. Say they want to build a mountain bike trail, or an OHV trailhead, or a boat dock, or a fishing pier at their local pond, whatever it is. We have funded anything from snorkeling spots, which isn't a common thing in Utah, to the more common in mountain bike trails, hiking trails, things like that. Lots of climbing, canyoneering, all of those types of activities are supported in this. 50-50 match with the communities really have to come in and put some skin in the game there, which is great, and we get to work a lot with communities on that. 65% of these dollars have gone to rural Utah, which is awesome, which is great to see them investing in the value of outdoor recreation around the state, because they see that it contributes to the quality of life and the economic value for their communities as they diversify and grow. We also, as part of this, have the Recreation Restoration Grant, which helps with the backlog of maintenance. So this is specifically for existing infrastructure around the state and how we can help revamp it, bring it back up to a usable and more sustainable place that the communities can benefit from. I want to mention on this that a lot of our communities, and I even say 65% going to rural Utah, a lot of our rural counties are 60, 70, 80, 90% public lands, right? Since we don't fund federal agencies with this grant, that's why we work with the communities, which requires the communities to have good relationships with their public land managers in their area. So, for example, Cedar City is a great example. They put in a great mountain bike trail system right outside of town. It's on BLM land. The BLM comes in to be a partner in this. We work with the community, help to fund them. And it's a win-win-win for the land management agencies, for the state, and for the local economy, because we're bridging those gaps of where oftentimes it's hard to bridge. And that's where the U-Org has been so successful. Just want to point out here real quick before we get into the discussion, some of the solutions that we see moving forward here. Outdoor recreation is one of the largest contributors to quality of life. So it needs to be a priority when we plan for outdoor recreation infrastructure and funding, because not only does it contribute to a great tourism economy to many of our states here around the West, but it contributes to the quality of life for our residents, which are building the economy, whether that's through the tech sector, the manufacturing sector, the financial sector. Those types of sectors are looking to establish businesses or bring employees to locations that have a high quality of life, and outdoor recreation is one of the main players in that. Like I said, it drives economic growth and health in every sector. And really the solutions we're looking at, and was mentioned by Vicki a little bit, but long-term planning is needed to be successful. When we're looking at destination management and tourism, destination management plans, it's the long-term view that really helps. And same with outdoor recreation. To help communities establish recreational master plans, to establish ongoing funding, so it's not one-off. One year they build a trail system, but then moving forward they don't have money to maintain, sustain, or expand as needed and adjust. And assist in planning for rural and smaller communities. That's one of the needs we're finding here in Utah is, these rural communities maybe not have the resources to create a recreational master plan or a trails master plan or something like that, or to work with their other counties and communities in their region to establish this. And then local communities are our greatest stewards of our public lands. And we realize that. And so establishing those partnerships, like I mentioned before, between the community leaders and our federal land managers and public land managers really is key to making sure that we're moving forward in a sustainable manner and maintaining a manageable level of recreation in our communities. One last thing, and which many of you may know about, we're a member of the Confluence of States. So right now in the country there's 18 states that have offices of outdoor recreation. 14 of those states are currently members of what's called the Confluence of States. I had the honor of of our annual meeting earlier this week, meeting with many of these members. And like Jordan mentioned, many of the states here in the West are members of this confluence and have offices. We stand on 4 pillars. The goal of the confluence is conservation of stewardship, education and workforce training in the outdoor industry and outdoor recreation economy. Economic development, so to help, like we said, these communities to diversify their economies, and then public health and wellness through outdoor recreation and outdoor recreation access and opportunities. The great thing about this is we're all different states, but we have the same goal, and it's really been eye-opening to see all the different states with all the different leadership styles and politics behind it come together to get behind outdoor recreation, because it is so important to all of our states, especially here in the West and our public land states, key to our economies and key to the quality of life that our residents have and provide. So, any questions? Here's my contact information, but I'm sure we're going to jump into some more in depth in some of these questions, and happy to answer them. So,
Thanks so much, Pitt. Well, I think a lot of the things that all of the panelists touched on in their presentations was that what these state organizations are really trying to do is better meet that demand that's being placed on public lands and state lands. So I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about the ways that you're trying to meet that through education. Pitt mentioned that's one of the pillars of the Confluence of States. Vicki, you had mentioned that you have set up the destination development team. That's kind of primarily their focus. So maybe you can talk about the ways that you're using education, signage, and these community-led campaigns to better manage and provide for experiences that visitors want, but also experiences that don't degrade the resource that people are there to enjoy. So Vicki, I'll start with you.
Yes, please just start. Well, I'll start by saying that I'll divide this up into two categories. One is educating our own industry, so that our industry does the right things, and the second is educating our visitors, and I'll emphasize that that's both Utah visitors. I love the way Jeff frames it, that we're thrilled that we have so many new people who are new to nature, and we're also thrilled to educate them on the safest and most responsible ways of being in nature. And so in terms of educating our industry, we actually have a great partnership with Jordan's group that we are educating our industry leaders on COVID resiliency, on creating best practices to deal with this new demand for access to outdoor recreation. What we're doing with the visitors is almost entirely under that Forever Mighty category that I headlined. So every state has different challenges in terms of responsible behaviors. In Utah, one of our key challenges is around responsible OHV use, off-highway vehicles. And so there's a very good nonprofit in Utah called Tread Lightly. We formed a communications partnership with them to go directly to those stakeholders. We have paid advertising, we have social media, and public relations to help those stakeholders understand the way to use their OHVs without damaging the land, and within the OHV category, it even varies community to community. Situations like Moab, where there's a lot of OHV use in the community, and it's disruptive to the community, late night riding and so forth. And then in other areas, it's just a matter of helping people understand to stay on trails and so forth. We also have a partnership, educational partnership with Leave No Trace, based in Colorado. They do a fantastic job of customizing the Leave No Trace principles state by state. So we're in the process of organizing that with them. I referenced the Gotta Go campaign through the Department of Environmental Quality. Another major emphasis for our office, we have these spectacular spectacular petroglyphs, some of the most remarkable archaeological protected areas in the world, except for that we don't have a way to protect them. They're outdoor museums. And people, there are a small number of people who are just vandals. But many, many people just do not understand that you don't add your signature to something that the Anasazis did or that other Native Americans did 1,000 years ago. That is art, it is preservation of history and culture that needs to be protected. So we're spending a lot of time with our state archaeologists figuring out the right way to protect these beautiful places. And a big part of it is us being ambassadors, learning to be ambassadors, learning to observe and intercept if we see problematic behaviors. That's a really complicated one, but we are deeply invested in protecting these places. Handful of others, but that gives you a sense of the way we're approaching the educational responsibilities under the Forever Mighty headline.
Anybody else want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I would just jump in and say, we work very closely with Vicky's office on a lot of these same campaigns and say, that require public outreach, require money to get this information out to the public. One of the requirements for our grants oftentimes is proper signage and education associated with a new outdoor recreation infrastructure to help with education. We also, in 2019, the Utah State Legislature established the Every Kid Outdoors initiative, which really is to help us get more and better education to our kids, our school-age kids, on what it means to be outside, what's best practices when you're out there recreating, how to stay safe, how to do it responsibly. We've discussed how do we get more in front of these kids of educating on what does it mean to live in a public land state, right? Where this is multi-use land, and how do we make sure that kids these days are understanding that being outside is part of life, but you got to be responsible as part of that life, and growing up here. So the Every Kid Outdoors initiative, again, getting to our youth. And then I look to great examples here in the state of Utah, not administered by any of us up here, but from our Forestry, Fire, and State Lands with their Fire Sense campaign this year was a huge success in educating the public and to mitigating some of the expensive costs that come from a lot of people being out recreating using our public lands. So I mean, there's a lot of efforts to this, and as Vicki mentioned, many of those as well. The reality is we have to come at it from all fronts to access or to get to all the people that we need to educate, whether it's visitors, residents, recreators, non-recreators, whatever it is. It takes a unified effort between multiple state agencies and multiple stakeholders to get this education process going and really reach everybody we need to reach.
I'll just quickly add, I think education is one of the main keys to addressing this issue. If people understand how to recreate safely and responsibly, they're more likely to do it. I think a lot of the folks that may be creating issues just simply don't know any better. They've never been outside, never been recreating outside. And so what we're doing with state parks is a lot of the stuff that we've done in the past, the traditional outreach through social media, websites, public service announcements, through local media sources. But what I wanted to highlight was one of the things that we're currently working on to this end is an app. It's called a Parks Pass app. And this app is ideally and ultimately going to be a go-to for visitors coming to Utah for our state parks. And I hope it can turn into something beyond state parks for all things recreation. we're working on this app with our universities in southern Utah with students that are creating the app and the system to manage prepayment for people that are coming to our state parks to take care of that before they get to the gate, to get them through and into the park quicker. It's also going to, we're gonna dip our toe in the water with day use reservations with it. We have a lot of our parks, just like a lot of the other recreation sites, that we have several hour-long waits to get into the park. We're gonna try out some day use reservations, just like we do with camping, to guarantee a site. So if you're driving to one of our state parks, you know that you're gonna get a site in there, and that app's going to manage that. It's gonna help us with capacity management. It's gonna help us ultimately to direct customers to where there's capacity to be able to host them. But getting to the education front, I think it's also going to be an important avenue to help visitors understand how to recreate responsibly and give them the information that they need so that they can make good decisions and stay safe and be responsible. And like Vicki said, unfortunately, there are a few people that choose to go a different direction, but I think education is going to help tremendously with a lot of the problems that we're experiencing in Utah and throughout the West.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll kind of continue on this theme of this education. We know that most visitors to public lands never really interact with a state park manager or a state park ranger or a national park ranger when they go recreate. So these collaborations that have been brought up by Vicki and Jeff and Pitt are really essential to work with the nonprofits, work with Friends of Group, and work with your local DMOs. And you all have programs that interact with each of those groups very specifically. So I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about the models that you've seen be successful for your organization to really help facilitate those collaborations with local communities that are able to manage and better steward resources at a local level. Vicki, you know, you do that a lot with the with your destination development team, and so and Pitt, obviously you're doing that a lot with these collaborations that have really guided these infrastructure development. So what are the models that you've seen really be successful to establish those collaborations at a local level?
We have a co-op program that enables local communities to start to organize their long-term visitor economy strategy. We work with a consultant actually based in Oregon, Coraggio Group, and they have been really helpful to us in engaging a series of local community discussions so that everybody gets a chance to participate in creating the vision. And then we walk people through the long-term steps that need to be taken to grow out their visitor economy thoughtfully. So an example is the Green River area, where they have access to remarkable outdoor recreation. They've also have a fairly depressed community in terms of Main Street, retail, and so forth. So we've worked with them over several years to build out their brand promise, which a big part of their brand promise is around rock climbing, because there's some of the best rock climbing in the world, a place called Joe's Valley. And through Coraggio Group and our team, we were able to help them see the vision of providing retail. People go to Joe's Valley, but you can't buy any rock climbing products anywhere near there. And so over time, they've established some really good retail with mountain climbing gear, rock climbing gear, a couple of really cool coffee shops and restaurants, and they've just incrementally started to build that brand around that as a destination. I referenced Helper. We also, on the, at the other end of the continuum, we're engaging with Moab, who, 20 years ago, it was a uranium mining town that was trying to figure out how to reinvent. And in a short period of time, it became a destination for mountain biking. But before anybody really knew it, you had these bumper stickers, Paris, London, Moab. And so we're all late in trying to help Moab have a tourism economy, because that is their economy, but also help them manage it better to improve the quality of the visitor experience and the community experience. So we're working through Coraggio, and then we're actually in early discussions about bringing in more assistance to help that community create a longer-term vision.
Thanks, Vicki.
And just to give to add to that and give a plug for the offices of outdoor recreation, if you don't have one in your state, please get one and work with your state leaders to get one, because that is the purpose of the office and the pillar of that confluence, and all the members of that confluence of states, is that we are here to bridge the gap between the private sector and the land management agencies and land planning around outdoor recreation. So we bring in the outdoor industry, represent them, get their feedback, find ways for them to support the nonprofit side of things in conservation and recreation and things like that. And we are the connection point then to the state agencies and to some of the federal agencies and things like that to make sure that they're talking, that we can find solutions. For that reason, we host the annual Utah Outdoor Summit, which we just held last week in Jordan's turf neck of the woods up at USU. We had one, we'll have one later this month. But that is a place where all of these different stakeholders, whether you're a land manager, whether you're a private industry, whether you're a tourism leader, whether nonprofits, any of that, they come together to have open discussions on how to solve some of these issues. And that's key, that private-public discussion, partnership, is where we really see success on moving the needle on any of these solutions that we need around outdoor recreation.
Jordan, can I take a minute to follow
Sure.
directly on Pitt's comment before we go to Jeff? As I thought about the session today and things that we would want you to know about Utah, I think Pitt has summarized really well our history and the importance of the Office of Outdoor Recreation. As Jordan said, we're the first state in the country to establish an Office of Outdoor Recreation. And something that has been super important for me is to be an ally, a partner, to help that office be as big and bold and have as much money as we can possibly find for it, because the outdoor recreation economy is so vital, not just to quality of life, as we talked about, the visitor economy, as we talked about, but also to other economic development. Infotech, as an example, we just had a survey this summer that showed that our outdoor recreation economy is one of the key drivers for infotech folks looking to relocate in Utah. And so as Pitt referenced, there is a national industry group with the 18 states that have offices of outdoor recreation. We also have a very active National Council of State Tourism Directors. And so we've had lots of discussion within that council over the years as these offices have been established, because whenever there's a new office, there are growing pains. So, in some states at some times, these offices have been overseen by the Office of Tourism. I have actually made vigorous arguments that that's not how it should work. Because the Office of Outdoor Recreation, while there's wonderful overlap, in many of the things that we're trying to accomplish. There are also some fundamental differences because in Utah, we see our Office of Outdoor Recreation as having a key responsibility for the welfare of Utahns, really. To be outdoor, get outdoors. There's a writer named Richard Louv, some of you may be familiar with. He talks about the nature deficit disorder, and I think Pitt's Every Kid Outdoor initiative goes right to the heart of that we want Utahns to grow up understanding how to be in nature, understanding how to have an active lifestyle.
Thanks, Vicki.
Yeah, thanks, Vicki. That was very nice.
Jeff, I'll turn it over to you for the last word on, particularly on collaborations and the ways that the state parks has really leveraged those to get things done.
I was just going to mention a couple things. One of the things that we do, I guess you can call it a strategy in making sure that we collaborate well with our local governments and local communities, is to make sure that our local park managers, or you can call them recreation managers, are on a first name basis with those folks, with county commissioners, with tourism directors, with other county leaders and stakeholders, because if they do have that relationship, they're going to be able to solve problems, I guess issues before they become problems. Those relationships are so important. The other thing that's helpful is our local park managers are generally reside in those local communities, so it just further helps strengthen that relationship that makes this work. The other thing that a lot of our local counties participate in is a public lands meeting where they get all the public land managers together, a lot of times once a month, to talk about what's going on, whether it's events or challenges or success or just being all on the same page. And it's been tremendously helpful for us as a state park system, but I think it's been helpful for all of those community leaders and stakeholders to be able to help each other out and solve problems, solve issues before they become problems. Last thing I was going to mention is just we try to host as many community events as we can in our state parks. We want our local communities to feel like their state park is their park, their local park. And I think that just helps further strengthen those relationships. So I guess it's all centered around relationships and communication, but it's so important and it's been so helpful in the success of our parks, and I think in the success of tourism in these local communities.
Great, thanks, Jeff. We have about 10 or 12 minutes left. We can open it up for questions now.
Reg Johnson, the Public Lands Office. A quick question on the collaboration, because I struggle with this a lot. This week I was out at the Energy Summit in Vernal, and the discussion was, how do we get across to people that I think it was North Face, about 80 to 90% of their product is made with hydrocarbons. And if you ask a lot of the outdoor folks, they're against hydrocarbons, they're against drilling and stuff like that. We see the same thing with some of our forest products or forest projects. We're doing disturbance, but that's not what they like to see. We see grazing, but that's not what they like to see. Your thoughts on how we could connect those dots and do some education where these are multiple use lands? How do we close that loop and connect those dots?
Who wants to tackle that one?
Well, I'll get it started. Actually, I wish I'd said something before Reg stood up, because what I wanted to acknowledge is how important our partnership is with the Public Lands Policy Council to sort these exact things. This informal working group was established under Governor Herbert, and it's really gotten traction. under Governor Cox. And I want to give a shout out to Reg because of the way he's organized discussions so we can start to sort these hard problems together. But I do think we have some examples, and Pitt may be able to elaborate more. But over time, we get a lot of feedback from the outdoor rec community with concerns about mixed use. And I think we've done a good job in Utah of surgically analyzing and in some circumstances, the governor, and I'm trying to remember the details of one, Reg, but to me it's the model where there was a project that was really too close to was it Dinosaur National Monument?
One at Dinosaur and one at Zion.
Yeah, and so the governor was willing to take a stand and call out that was just too close and visible to visitors. And so to me, I feel like you're on the path of how we should do that. But it's really painful each time because we have people who express extreme views, and then Reg has to be the one to write a letter. And, so I think it's going great.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, like, Reg, you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
I need some help.
No, but I mean, the reality behind that, and Reg, you're right there, right? Most of the people we work with in the outdoor recreation economy seem to lean one direction as far as use of public lands versus others. And how do you address that when public lands are mandated for multi-use, and they have a purpose? But you mentioned it, Reg. Coming back to the key is education right off the bat. We need to educate individuals more on all of these things, and then you have to be a bit more surgical about this. You can't have a blanket statement that says, all of the BLM land in Utah is great for oil and gas, so that's what we're going to do. No, there's certain areas that there is more value in recreation there, or there maybe is value in some mining to help us reach goals for sustainable energy or for products, that are getting us off of other sources of energy or something like that. But you have to be surgical in that, I think, in looking at each individual case. And take every one of those opportunities to educate both sides of the aisle there. I am for the Office of Outdoor Recreation, right? I always seem to lean towards if you bring up a piece of land, like, what should you use this for? I say recreation, right? Like, that should be campsites and mountain bike trails. And obviously there's other people in the room that see a better use for it, but to be able to be collaborative and educate each other on that is key. And having the relationships, as was mentioned earlier, with the stakeholders outside of government offices and in the stakeholders in the private sector and nonprofit world, to have good, meaningful conversations with them as well through that process.
Hi, my name's Laura Page. I'm with Deloitte. As a follow-on to that question, curious how what you're seeing in terms of responses to your point about in Joe's Valley, there needs to be more rock climbing gear and pulling in the companies who can help supply that. After the OR Festival left Utah, and then we see things like Patagonia saying we're not going to work with Jackson Hole Resort because of some political thing. What are you seeing when trying to work with those kinds of retailers who can help provide that boost to the economy in these places where people come for outdoor recreation? Is there a challenge that you're still seeing over the last couple of years? Is it getting better?
My experience with that is that the reason why directors of outdoor recreation are in the positions they are is because they have those relationships. So I would just encourage state leaders, governors, legislators, whoever it is, to really lean on the people who you've put in position to help in those conversations. That is why we are here, and we have those relationships with those brands. Because I think in most cases, sometimes it's a political stance, and people get angry really fast, and then it's hard to step back from that. But if we can, to use the term Jeff used, right, if we can address issues before they become problems, then that's a great way to do it. Because I think those conversations they're not as hard as media or the outside, world sees them as. They're solvable problems, and we can get through those if you rely on the resources that are in place for that. And like I said, offices of outdoor recreation all over the country, that was the purpose of them, to help bridge that gap between, the private sector and the public sector.
I would just add to that under the big headline of outdoor retailer leaves Utah, there are actually wonderful relationships cultivated by Pitt with major outdoor brands, and so it is that headlines lie, and I'm not taking away that, as Pitt has said, there was a genuine drama between the state and a handful of retailers. There's a whole outdoor industry association with partners that are in constant communication, mostly with Pitt, but with others of us, saying, we sure would like to have our show in Utah, and we sure would, and there have been other break-off shows that have come back to Utah, and so we feel good about those relationships as a whole.
Can I ask you, go back to, so I think both Vicki and Jeff mentioned sort of building out more campsites and more parking spaces, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the interesting phenomena, I guess, is sort of secondary impact of this dramatic increase in tourism, particularly over the last couple of years, but even long before that, is dispersed recreation, and it's a different phenomenon, right? So it's interesting, as I spent many years living on the East Coast and then came back, I noticed immediately that some of the places that had been virtually empty and great places for seclusion 20, 25 years ago when I first visited are now really busy. And so what are the, it's one thing to sort of build out additional campsites in that sort of structured context, but it's a little more challenging, I imagine, when you're looking at how do we make sure that we're not overrunning areas where it's not something that we control really, right? It's just a dirt road out there that all of a sudden has become much more popular than it was before. How do you look at that, and how do you kind of tackle that challenge as people just love to spread out now? They can't go online and get a reservation, so they're just thinking, well, I'll just take my RV or my truck and go out on Hole in the Rock Road and find a great place to just pull off to the side and recreate.
Not sure I have an answer to your question, but just a thought to share. One of the parks that I mentioned, actually both of them, Utah Raptor in Grand County and Lost Creek in Morgan County, both used to be, 10 years ago, you could probably go there and there'd be maybe a dozen people, especially in Grand County, camping out there, and I don't think it was really that big of a problem. Now, in Grand County, I believe that's kind of the last place within reasonable distance to the national parks and all the recreation areas in that area that you can go and do that now. And now it's gone from maybe a dozen or two campers to literally hundreds of campers. And it's got to the point where in order to be able to protect the landscape, to address health and safety issues, if we're going to allow camping in that area, we've got to add facilities and infrastructure to be able to handle it. And also important to that, on top of the facilities, is just have a presence there to make sure that people are being safe and responsible. And that's going to make a really big difference at both of those sites to be able to take care of that issue. You can't do that everywhere. And I understand what you're saying, and I'm not really sure what the answer to it, other than I think I'm going to go back to education. It's so important to reach out to the people that are recreating in Utah to help them understand how to recreate responsibly and protect that privilege. I also like to go out and recreate, camp and hike and ride ATVs on public land that's undeveloped. But I know that if that's not taken care of, we're going to lose it someday. And I think if we can do a better job at getting that message out to the general public, they're going to want to protect that privilege as well. Not sure if that answered your question or not, but.
No, it's a tough problem, right? It's a thorny problem. I'm just curious kind of how you think about it, so that's helpful.
I would add, I absolutely agree with Jeff that education, we're all spending so much time on that. And then the other interesting thing for me is realizing that we aren't the way we were. And I experienced this personally. I think we all see it from different perspectives. I'll give you an example, is that I recently hiked Delicate Arch. I actually went there with the tourism director in Colorado. We couldn't get in the first day. We went earlier the next day. We got in. We did the hike. Of course, for me, I channel back to the first time I did Delicate Arch, which was when my children were 3 and 5 years old, many, many years ago. And we had this, what I would call a solitary experience, where we almost felt like we were discovering Delicate Arch on our own. And I remember coming around that bend and thinking, oh my goodness, we found this arch. That was the feeling. And so doing it this summer with hundreds and hundreds of people, I couldn't help but feel nostalgic for what I remember. Interestingly, I got in conversations, and I didn't identify myself, but I just got in conversations with a lot of people along the way, and they were having a remarkable life experience. Very different, remarkable life experience than I had, but they were still feeling that sense of discovery. They were not troubled by the volume of people, because that's the only way they knew to experience it. And that's a lot of what's going on in the West, as the world is just so hungry for everything we have to offer.
Thanks so much, Vicki, and thanks to all of our panelists. I think we are at time, so it's great to have 3 state leads talk about the amazing things that are going on here in Utah. So a lot of things that the Western states can learn from and adapt to suit their needs. So Vicki, Jeff, and Pitt, thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.